Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining this particular Change Nerd session. Today we are going to have a conversation about learning in the flow of work. So Stephanie, Change Nerd co-founder, is here, and we want to just have a short conversation with you all about learning in the flow of work. This is going to be a two-part conversation. So the first part is essentially me and Stephanie, and the second part is Stephanie and I speaking with other experts who lead learning functions within the industry. So Stephanie, when you think about trends or behavioral patterns that's happening amongst like in society, when you think about YouTube, do you think that that's having an impact on how we're thinking about learning at work?
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you and I talk about this so much. I think one of the beautiful things that you really articulate well is this concept of learning in the flow of work, right? Which is basically what we're talking about today. I know you have some thoughts as well, but we think about it now, right? When you think about YouTube, you think about all of these key sort of micro learning moments that people can have. They have this access at their fingertips. So no longer are people, really expecting their organization per se to have all of the learning right there for them, or building out internally into an organization. Because if I need to know how to do something, let's say with Excel, or I need to know how to do something like how do I create a change plan, all I have to do is pick up my phone and type in how do I create a change plan? No offense to anything else, or the education that we've had in order to sort of think about how we actually create that. But now learning in the flow of work, really picking up key tools and having them at our fingertips while we're learning. And this as well. We talk a lot about the educational aspect of this. True learning, or in the education sphere, there's a term called scaffolding,
Yeah.
which is essentially, right, you scaffold, you sort of start where someone currently is, and then in order for them to sort of increase their competency, there's going to be one sort of like next step, then the next step, then the next step. And a lot of times at work, organizations themselves just say, okay, here's what everybody needs to know, but they don't think about that scaffolding aspect. So
Yeah.
yeah, what about you?
Yeah. I think so. I have a 4-year-old, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times he's on YouTube Kids. And one thing I've realized, so I have my youngest is 4, my oldest is 12, and my oldest, he learns, well, he learned through reading books essentially. And so my 4-year-old, he's actually learning through storytelling and reading books, but he's learning a lot. He's consuming a lot of information on YouTube Kids. And
Mm.
so much, like it's almost like he lacks the patience at times to even watch Netflix because he can't shift through like he can on YouTube Kids. And when you think about what's happening in the organization, I think a lot of professionals are kind of going through the same thing because we grew up over the last decade on YouTube, and even LinkedIn Learning, and before that I believe it was something else, but having the ability to go deep and come out on a particular topic.
Huge.
And I think there's a major trend that's happening. There's a ton of research that says we have to upskill like 1 billion people worldwide, right? And if you break that down within our organizations, you can probably understand why that trend goes up. But in speaking with a lot of learning executives, they're really trying their best to connect the learning plans to the strategy now.
Sure.
So, traditionally you would have like a learning and development team who would, upon request, they would support a project,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's the way a lot of organizations have functioned in the past. But now more so than ever, even in COVID right now, there's a real strong value prop in thinking more strategically and connecting the learning plan to the 3YP or to your company's 3-year strategy, and identifying what are the change needs. I did a bit of research, and it looks like previously a lot of organizations, they conducted learning on a formal basis, right? Like compliance training, those annual kind of reminders and things. So it was either training happened around a particular event, or it was just kind of an annual requirement. And now it looks like training is being broken down into 3 specific areas. So you still have the need for requirement training, that annual kind of reminder around compliance and other serious areas. But there's also a need for micro learning. So micro learning doesn't need to happen in every single area, but in speaking with the business, I'm sure the business will help, HR identify, hey, we need micro learning content in these particular areas. So you have event formalized as the first one. Second one is micro learning, and then the third area is really new capabilities,
Mhm.
right? So if you think about the new technology being implemented in organizations, or even through research and development, just new business models being implemented. I mean, COVID is forcing supply chain functions to innovate and, and outsource different activities. I mean, business models are really shifting across the enterprise, and so there's a need for new content to help people grasp new capabilities. And so those are the three areas that,
Mhm.
according to research, that I'm seeing. It's not really getting, a lot of the experts aren't really labeling it like that, but just in reading the content, I'm gleaming like those three major themes: event-based, micro learning, and then new business capabilities. So I'm interested in throwing that idea at other experts and seeing what they say around it. What are your
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people too, Brian, thanks for sharing all those. I think a lot of our people who, watch this or who are in the ChangeNerd community, you and I talk a lot about how, anytime you learn something new, that's a change.
Yep.
So anyone who's in the learning space is a change maker, is a true change agent, because you're asking somebody to do something differently. So I think as you're sort of talking about that, those are really the different levels of, I want to say efficiency, right? Like micro learn, like you were talking about, like Jay or Aiden, your sons who, take a look at YouTube Kids. Think about the level of efficiency,
Yep.
right? You're also creating self-directed opportunities for people to learn, right? There's a platform that's out there. They have to actually assess their gap, right? You're actually teaching them in a way to assess their own gap. What don't I know yet? What have I not learned? And they're able to sort of then say, okay, well, then how do I get there? And then they're creating their own essentially individualized education plan,
Exactly.
right? Or individualized development plan within 30 seconds. Oh, I need to learn, the next, what's the new, song coming out, or what's the next trend that's coming out. We go out, we either go to Google, we go to YouTube, we go to any of those platforms, and you're building your own individualized development plan, right? You might go and you might call up your friends or talk to your friends, right? Where, that could be a mentorship relationship, or, a sort of relationship discussion where they're like, oh yeah, like I just did this research on this, and you're gleaning information in that way as well. So not only are you doing the content aspect, which goes back to learning, which is the 70-20-10 plan, right? And
Exactly.
then you're sort of taking that information, that knowledge that you get off of YouTube Kids in that space, or, for the people who are watching, you're able to go, maybe you did a training or a certification or something along those lines, or, you might reach out to Brian or to me and say, hey, I'm doing this really big, large scale project or whatnot. Can you help me sort of think through that, right? That's like a mentorship or relationship, that 20%, if you will. And then they're actually going out and doing it, or, to use your analogy of your sons, they're actually going out
Mhm.
and actually practicing it and seeing if it actually gives them the concepts and the competencies that they need. And then if they don't, what do? They go right back and say, oh, I don't want to learn that again, or oh, that video is not like swipe to the left or whatnot,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
2 minutes in, they're like, I don't need this anymore. I already learned it. What's my next sort of video? So learning in the flow of work, I think one of the core competencies or the core elements of that is that people need to become, or need to start thinking about, where am I relative to where the organization wants me to be? Where am I relative to where I want to be? And it's a self-assessment, right? And then through that self-assessment, you're able to then say, where are the resources that are out there that I'm able to learn in the flow of work? Is it through my
exactly.
organization, right? Is it through my phone, my tablet, something that, is external to my organization? Is it going to associations? Is it going to ChangeNerd, right? And posting a question in the community? You can do that immediately on the app with your phone. You can post a question right in the flow of work. So
Exactly.
I think right now, rapid sort of learning is, to use your point earlier, micro learning, but also rapid learning is going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I also, one gap that I see in the research, they don't call it out, but the importance of community, right? When you think about learning in the flow of work,
Mhm.
it's not always listening to a podcast or watching video
Yeah.
content. It's also around who's like, is there a person that I can reach out to right now and
Sure.
and have a conversation, 5-15 minute, learn what I need to learn so I can continue moving,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's a gap that I see today, in reviewing the research and a lot of the content out there. But it's just, if you look at the change in our community, right, we focus heavily on change management. You can watch the videos, you can take monthly courses, but the idea of having a community associated with the learning content, it's like, oh, I can connect with this person from this company or this company, right? And so I think in speaking with different organizational leaders, I think there's opportunity for us to create even more community within organizations, helping people
Mm.
connect the dots, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that you just talked about is when you have to learn in the flow of work, or there's an expectation that you're learning, right on the job, or something's going on. You need that community around you. It's a socialization, it's a normalization, right? You're calibrating against others, and there's a concept that many of my MSLOC at Northwestern alum as well will know, but this concept in learning about explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge,
Mhm.
right? And if you're on the job and you're sort of just building this mastery or whatnot, everything that's really I'll use the term invisible, if you will, but this tacit knowledge that we have, that's really, it's just in our brains, it's there. It may not be able to be made explicit, but if we're in that community and we start to observe and see other people doing something, we might pick up on a different way of doing something. Oh, I want to hold my marker this way if I'm writing on the board, or, something as simple as that. I remember back when I was in teaching, or in school to become a teacher in education. And I remember, part of that training was really observing as many other teachers as possible. So people who are
Yes,
masters in the field, right?
yes,
And
yes.
it was about putting me in the position to just visualize and see maybe, the tacit knowledge that individuals had. They were doing things like, I remember one of my former mentors was incredible. And the one thing he told me after I was teaching was like, hey, he's like, were you asking your students a question because you kept saying, okay? Okay. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't even know I was doing that. So I immediately stopped that. Again, it's these mastery concepts, or these people who are masters in their field, who are able to observe you, see you, give you concepts and content and coaching right in the flow of work. You're learning right there. I was able to take that and immediately apply that, right into the next class. So I think that's the other key thing, is that the learning, the flow of work doesn't need to come, you said this earlier, Brian, doesn't need to come from your phone. It doesn't need to come from raw content that your organization internally is putting onto a platform, or spends a lot of dollars on technology. It can be an individual that you see doing something that you want to try out, and you try it, and then if you're right in the flow of work and you're seeing, okay, did that work, did it not? Obviously, things that aren't necessarily safety issues and things that aren't life and death, but
Yeah.
trial and error is one of the biggest ways that we can actually really learn what works and what doesn't work. That's what innovation is based on, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Also in the research, they called it out very clearly that, traditional institutions are not putting out enough learning content to help people get ahead, right? So there's really a need to look at these rather informal channels, like, online communities and micro learning, and different things like that, to help people just get where they need to be,
Yeah.
without doing a deep dive. Everything doesn't require a deep dive. So it's going to be interesting to continue this conversation with the experts,
Yeah.
and to get real testimonies on how they're rethinking learning within the organization. So,
Yeah.
Stephanie, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Yeah,
Uh,
thank you for having this conversation with me.
yeah, so to the ChangeNerd community, we really appreciate you all for watching this video, and be sure to watch the second part of this conversation as we connect with the experts. All right, thank you.